Okay, I'm self-introducing, but I don't need to say much. I'm the chief scientist and co-founder of Swoop Analytics with my colleague here, Kai Kerr. The first question I want to ask is, who's wearing a Fitbit today, or well, let's stand up if you've got one of these on. Yeah. No. Get a few steps up. Yeah, any health device. So stay standing if you think it's actually impacted your behaviour, even just a little bit. All right. So who's just about to go to bed? 9,900 steps. Decided just do that last lap around the lounge room. Get up to 10,000. We all do that, right? So we all do that. You do this. Exactly. So you can sit down now. Okay. So what do you think would happen if we had that Fitbit or that device that could actually tell you how you're performing at work? Wouldn't that be scary, wouldn't it? So what about if it could monitor your tone of voice, your body language, poor body language? You're talking too much or too loudly, not talking enough. You're interrupting too much. You're not facing the person that you're talking to. What about the big one? You're not showing empathy to the person you're talking with. Who wants one of those devices? No, I don't want one of those either. The scary thing about all of this is that the folks at MIT Media Lab had invented one of these nearly a decade ago. It's called a social tag. You used to wear it around your neck like this. Now, I looked online and the latest version looks something like this. Right? Now, it hasn't really taken the market by storm from what I can tell, for the probably reasons that you wouldn't buy one. But nevertheless, this fellow here, Sandy Pentland, is the guy that sort of invented a lot of this stuff. It was his team. And he did manage to convince some teams to wear these things so he could monitor these sorts of social behavioural things and study teams. And he was able to define what constitutes a high-performing team based on the way people interacted with each other like this. And he put it together in a book he called Social Physics. So he's actually, he's hijacked the term physics, social and so forth, and he's calling it reality mining. So if you've been a sociologist, sociologists, they do lots of surveys. This is a way he said we can find out about how people are socialising without having to just ask them. So anyway, we'll talk about him a little bit later. Let's continue this medical analogy. Okay, so it's 2030. You have to go for your annual checkup. Local GPs are overloaded. So the government, in their wisdom, Medicare, have decided that rather than going to visit your GP, you're going to get a survey. Right? It has about 50 questions, right? So the normal stuff, how are you feeling today? Do you get tired going upstairs? How much do you sleep at night? What do you eat? Vegetables, meat, what have you, so forth. Anyway, you struggle through, you fill this sort of survey in. The government guarantees that there's no AI engine behind here that's going to respond straight away, but they will come back to you in a few weeks. And sure enough, in a few weeks, you get this little email. It comes back with your link, you hit the link, and it tells you about your health. It says that you're not on death's door because you actually made it through the survey. But it doesn't tell you much more than that. It basically feeds back to you basically what you told it in different words. But there were a few interesting things. They sort of knew your demographic, and they could say, well, for women between 40 and 45 in your suburb, you probably sleep better than 80% of them, but you don't exercise as much as 43% of them, or something like that. So that's sort of interesting. But in the end, it's not a fulfilling experience, is it? It wouldn't be a fulfilling experience. You wouldn't be happy with that, would you? When you go to the GP, you expect them at least measure your blood pressure, maybe take some blood or what have you. So we wouldn't be happy with that. So when we move into our work environment, and the people at work have heard about Dr. Adrian here at Hurst, and they want to have a wellness program. They want to put a wellness program together. So what do? They run a survey. So who's done one of these in the last 1 or 2 years? Leave your hand up if you thought you personally got some value out of doing it. No value? No value. Now, I don't have anything against surveys because, in fact, this sometimes is the only way you can get stuff done. Now, Kai and I actually ran surveys in our previous company for 8 years. We ran organisation network analysis surveys. We ran more than 100 of these, right? So we had probably 40, 50 different clients. So we really got this down to a fine art. But there were some things that we sort of worried about, I guess. This is people analytics for the people. Was it really for the people? Or was it really for the management or the leaders? We were concerned a lot about whether the leaders could actually change the organisation based on our insights. You've seen some examples from Melanie this morning about the sort of insights that you can get from our O&A, and I certainly wouldn't encourage you to stop doing that. I think that's wonderful stuff. But certainly in our experience, whether they could make change from that, rather than just send out a generic report of the results that could impact you, it really didn't happen that much. We did the O&A thing where we identified who the key brokers were and so forth, and that was very important, and these are the people that need to be your change agents and what have you, but invariably you'd sit down there with this list and you could just see the people looking down the list, oh, that person's a bit of a troublemaker, we wouldn't want them in the change program. Well, who's that person? Never heard of them, no, we'll cross them out and so forth. So all of a sudden, you end up with the status quo. Right? So we're worried about that. And I guess the other thing we're worried about was that, this was sort of like an industrial age type system. It was like a paternalistic system where we ask you for stuff, you tell us about you, and we'll tell you what you need to do to get better. Right? That's what the model was like. And we're a bit uncomfortable with that because this was supposed to be for the people. In fact, really, it was just like that engagement survey. You fed it information, but you got nothing back. Who's read this book? Never heard of it at all before? The 9 Lies About Work? I'll admit to some confirmation bias here because this book, it's framed like, the Mythbusters, like here's this thing that everyone believes and we're going to disprove it now with our data and our research and what have you. And, one of the ones that I read, I was going through this book and saying, yes, I found all this out, doing our studies and what have you. And one of them was about your boss can't rate you, right? Can't effectively rate you. You might say to me, well, tell me something I don't know, But they also said your boss can't actually rate your competencies either, right? It sounds sort of fairly confronting, isn't it? I can remember a project that I was doing with an organisation. I was sitting in the HR area, and right next to me was this lady who was doing a competency plan, probably a workforce plan. But the first thing she had to do was work out what the competencies were in the organisation. She had this huge spreadsheet. Down one side, 55 competencies. Across the top, all the line managers that she was going to ask to rate their staff by each of these 55 competencies. That was a nightmare. I just wanted to get our survey out before she got hers out. But nevertheless, I saw one of the competencies. I said, we're actually surveying for this. And it was about communication. It says, who are the people that can communicate and motivate their peers? And I said, we actually measure that directly too because, Al mentioned Rob Cross yesterday morning. Rob's into this collaborative overload, which I'll talk about too later, but before that, or even now, he's very interested in energy within networks. Right? So one of our questions was, in your network, who energises you? And it was a scale, like from 1 to 5. So 5, that means that when you had a conversation with this person, you just came back and you were so energised, you wanted to change the world. Right? On the other end, it was sort of like, oh, I've got to get back to my desk and meditate for an hour or something like that. This is terrible, So anyway, we had a list of the most motivating communicators. Right? We also had a list of the most de-energising communicators. Tactfully, we didn't share that list. But the most energising people, as you would guess, there's no correspondence with what they were getting from the leaders. The leaders really couldn't judge that competency, and certainly not when they were asked to judge all the others. Right? So in essence, I said, yes, that's exactly what the case is. Now, This was their number one lie. People don't care which company they work for. This is a bit confronting, isn't it? Because this is what we're doing people analytics for the company for. Now, I had confirmation bias around this too, because the way that they demonstrated that this was true was that they looked at who people actually gathered together around, who they worked with, who they wanted to go with. And they found that there was much more correspondence between functions than the companies themselves. Right? So if you worked in IT or legal or HR or what have you, you had more bonding with other people in other companies in that discipline than your own company. And therefore they made the conclusion that then it didn't matter what company you worked for. You might just move. So if you're a people analytics person, you're not enjoying where you are, you'll just go and move to another people analytics company or something like that. So that was what they used. Now in my own work, I'd been doing this culture mapping, and I'd been doing culture mapping across different functions. I found the same thing. The shape of the maps were the same if you're in an IT company, department, doesn't matter which department. If you're in an HR or people and culture company, your shape looked the same, independent. So it's a subculture. So I guess what we're saying is that there is no universal culture that your company has. You have lots of subcultures, and the best you can do is get those subcultures to work together. And this was the argument that they were making. But the final thing they said was, when people choose not to work somewhere, the somewhere isn't the company, it's the team. The team is the sun, moon and stars of your experience. I'll just give you a few seconds to think about that in your own context. Why would you join or why would you leave a company? Or if you've left a company, why did you leave, do you think? The manager? It was just toxic, was it?
Not me personally, but
yeah. Yeah.
Not necessarily they were toxic, but just the relationship.
The relationship.
Didn't work.
Was it one-to-one, or was there more than just the manager, or was it just the manager?
Mainly the manager.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you're in a very hierarchical organisation, the manager actually plays the key role. All right. Anyone else with a thought about that? Do people sort of believe this, that it's actually, so if you're in a good team, in a bad company, you might stay, but if you're in a toxic team, poor manager, everybody upset, great company, you still might leave. This is their contention. Right? So that leads into, I guess my claim is that you can't look at employee engagement independent of the people around them. Right? So it's not just like how happy are you, it's why are you happy, or why are you unhappy, And more often than not, it's the actual people that are immediately around you. It's not the CEO, it's not the sort of company even, it's the people you're working with every day. So, people and team analytics. So this is our only slide with Swoop stuff on it. So, but what I wanted to say is that when Kai and I sort of pivoted to Swoop from Optimise, doing the project-based O&As sort of 5 years ago now, a bit after 5 years ago, there's a few things that we really wanted to do that were different. One was we wanted to give something to the people that actually were participating in the exercise. And that's our personal tab. So this is the personal tab. So you would get to see, first when you launch Swoop, you get to see your own data. Okay. And you can see there's other aggregations, your business unit, your team. In Yammer, that could be your group, your enterprise, and what have you. Okay. And in fact, we want to democratise it, right? So we didn't want to say, well, you have to be allowed to look at this stuff because the analytics people have to give permission. We wanted to give it to you. The only exception was you couldn't look at other people's personal tab, right? So it is privacy protected. But all the other stuff, we also respect the secrecy of teams or privacy of teams. So if you set up a team that's private, you can't see that either, right? So, but beyond that, everything is available to you. And largely, if you look at the business segment and the enterprise level, most of it's quite open to you, right? And whether you choose to look at it or not doesn't matter really, does it? I mean, the fact that you've got the opportunity to look at it has has an impact on you. You can look at it if you want to, right? So the other thing is that, we've heard about active and passive O&A, and this is passive O&A, so we're not surveying people. But it's not project-oriented, right? Because before, the other issue we had was that these were just, the projects we were doing were a point in time, right? So you got one data point. Maybe a year later, and I think Melanie talked about doing another one next year of hers, you've got 2 data points. So you still really don't have a trend, do you? We wanted something that actually gave you something every day. In fact, even every hour. So, this data is updated. It could be as much as every hour. If you're a very big organisation, it might take a day, but this is current data all the time. Right, so the data comes from, all right, let me back a bit. We launched it with Yammer, right? And we did that purposefully because we wanted to look at platforms where people informally and more casually interacted. And we didn't think email was that. And other people have done email mapping. We didn't think that. So we stayed away from that. We had done some experience with Yammer. When Microsoft bought it in 2012, it started to go across the whole enterprise in a lot of organisations. So we felt the time was right to go with Yammer. We followed that up with Workplace by Facebook. So that's like a competitor. That's Facebook working inside the enterprise. And there's a number of organisations that are using that. And Nestle was talking this morning, they're one of them. And NAB, we're talking this morning, they're another one. But there's a lot of people using Yammer, it's a similar sort of thing. And more recently, we've got a project for Teams now. So how many of you using Microsoft Teams or looking to or about to? Right, it's pretty much on everybody's agenda, right? It's sort of, so together with, say, Yammer and Teams or even Workplace, because some people have got Workplace by Facebook and using Teams as well, we're covering a lot of interactive territory. And it's the informal chit-chat stuff as well, it's the threaded discussions, all of this sort of stuff. So it's quite rich and it's going to get richer, right, as more people use it. In fact, after the virus, I think it'll even get richer again because people will be forced to work this way. Right, anyway, the other interesting thing about this is these personas, these characterisations of your behaviour, we knew they were quite attractive in our consulting because that used to engage people. When we did that, we implemented it in Swoop, and this is what they are. So we use the data to characterise your behaviour. So if you're a catalyst, that's like a social media influencer. That's somebody who can put something out there and get a lot of reactions, right? So that's like an influencer. A broadcaster is somebody who puts a lot of stuff out there and gets no reactions, right? So they're just putting information out there that people may or mostly aren't interested in. Engagers are aspirational. So this is what Melanie's top right-hand corner is. So these are the people that can balance what they give and what they receive. Right? So, in fact, they're the people that do tend to link people. As you can see, it's got a link. The responders we call like the caregivers of the network. So they want to make sure that everybody gets a response of some sort, even if it's just a like or what have you. And the observers are basically people that don't interact anything much on the platform at all. We just call them observers. Now, when we introduced this to our very first customer, which was Westpac, about 3 to 4 years ago now, we thought, this is a way that the general staff, they'll jump on this, they'll love this and what have you. It turned out that the CEO, Brian Harcher at the time, saw this and he said, wow, I want a report in my office with my top 100 executives and their persona. All right? Now we had a bit of a dilemma, didn't we? So we're walking on, there's a line here, like we've got privacy protected sort of, is this going across the line, exposing his leaders? Of course, he was going to expose his own as well, of course. So, well, we're a startup, our first customer, the CEO, it's Westpac, we did rationalise that a bit and we said, all right, well, he is exposing his own persona. The admin people in Yammer can get this data if they were asked to anyway by trawling through because they can get to anything. So we built it, right? So we built it, and did it change people's behaviour? I can talk about this now because there was an article in the Financial Review a few years ago about this, and they interviewed some of Brian's direct reports, and I can still remember this lady said, geez, when I saw that system, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to lift my game here. And also anecdotally, we heard people saying, well, you wouldn't want to be going to a meeting with Brian in Brian's office and being seen as an observer or a broadcaster on his screen. Now, as it turns out, it wasn't a one-off. Many of our clients have gone down this road now with their leaders, right? In fact, they're the ones that have been using the personas the most. They get very competitive with these things. We have a influencers list as a widget. The most influential people in the company, they want to be there, right? They want to be there. One of our partners is actually coaching one of the big brands in the US using Swoop, coaching them how to engage online because they want to be influential people in the network, not just because of their position. So interesting stuff. Now, this is the team tab. So this is the other thing that's important. So for our Teams product, we've actually come up with a number of team-level personas. And the reason we did that is because despite the name, there's a lot of sorts of groups that aren't really teams using Teams. Right? Only about 20% of them are actually using what I would say are real teams. You've got teams with several hundred people. Microsoft don't help by making the upper limit 5,000, right? And our biggest team we found had 4,500, right? So are they really a team? But this example here is actually one of my teams with a customer, and it's really there to just demonstrate what a self-directed team looks like. It's sort of small, so that the research tells us anything more than 10 isn't a productive team, right? 4 to 6 is the sweet spot. This fits that. You can see that the lines here are red because they're reciprocated. So if I post something, you reply, you post something, I reply, and we do this quite a lot. We have a reciprocal relationship here. So we can tell from the analytics, this is quite a tight team. So when you're thinking about engagement within a team, we're more or less talking about teams like this, not about the big forums with hundreds of people and so forth. All right, so let me move on to this report is something that's coming out in a couple of weeks. It's something I spent a lot of time on with one of my colleagues the last few months. We're benchmarking Microsoft Teams, users of Microsoft Teams. Now, Swoop does benchmarking. We've been doing benchmarking of Yammer. We've benchmarked over 100 companies and every year for the last 4 years. Workplace by Facebook, we've done that as well a couple of times. But this is our first Teams one. Not that many organisations, 15, but there's over 5,000 teams, right? Nearly 50,000 active participants. So for this sort of study, this is a big study, right? So in that sort of monitoring, not surveying teams, but actually monitoring what they do. The next biggest we've seen, IBM did one with about 400 a few years ago. Google did one that we talked about quite a lot. Aristotle, it was 180 teams, right? So we're talking about a lot more teams. And we have a section in the report on people analytics. So that's what I'm going to share with you. And of course, the title of my talk had collaborative overload. If you came to see this is it, sort of. So what did we do? We didn't use all the data. We used the data from probably the 5 biggest companies. So there's probably about 10,000 people in here, maybe a few more. And we plotted their activity, their posts, likes, mentions, actually not chats, that's a mistake. But so it goes up to 4,000, 4,500 over a 12-week period. Right? But we also showed them according to their persona. Right? Now, as I said, the engagers are like Melanie's top right, so they're the people that are really connecting. These people here are about 1%. Now, Rob Cross says 4 to 5% of the people really drive the network. This is about the 1%. And you can see they do stand out from these ones here. That line there is about 2 interactions, which includes chat, every minute. Right? Every 30 seconds of a working day. This line here is the level is 1 activity every minute. Right? So that's pretty intense. Now, I was using 8 hours. They're probably working longer than 8 hours, but nevertheless, you can see this is pretty intense. So there's every likelihood they're overloaded. The way we'd present this, though, and it's not in the platform at the moment, we wouldn't present it to the management, we'd present it to them in your personal tab, and we would colour in your dots so you could see where you are. So if you're one of these up here, we wouldn't have to nudge you too hard to say, look, you may be overdoing it here. You might need to sort of think about how you might reduce your own personal overload. Now, what about this person up here? Should we worry about that person, that broadcaster? What are they doing? They're posting something in a team every 8 minutes. I think, we don't know actually because we don't get the content, right? We just get the metadata. We think this person is reporting in some sort of content and is just reporting out. So they don't care. Broadcasters don't really care whether they get a reaction or not. They put the information out there, job done. Right? So these people aren't, and even the catalysts, they're not really cognitively overloaded, are they? They're putting stuff out there. But, you know, whether they pay attention to what response they got is another thing. But these people, the responders and the engagers, if they're going to like or reply to something, which they do, they have to actually look at it and read it and internalise it. And if they're doing this every 30 seconds, that's pretty much of a cognitive overload, isn't it? You know, even if they're just liking, unless they just blind like, which I doubt what they're doing. I know sometimes people will just like the person rather than the message. You know, I like everything that Adrian does, so whatever he said, I'm going to push the like button, you know. But still, I've got to think about that, right? This we can use this data to understand. In fact, the individuals can use it themselves to understand whether they're really overloaded, because in our experience, if you ask somebody whether they're overloaded, they'll often say, no, I feel fine. You know, so this is another chart that again, it's not in the platform yet, but it's in the report, and it's about personal productivity. And I know you talked about productivity. In the social science world, in the social networking world, high performance is seen as people that can actually maintain a diverse network at the same time as being cohesive across that network. So this is sort of like social physics. It's hard to be connected to everybody closely when your network is big, right? So as you can see, there's nobody right in the top right, but you know, there's some pretty good performances sort of around it. Now, the size of these bubbles is the relatively difference in their activity. So somebody up here, this person here is doing a hell of a lot of stuff. You know, 70-something% reciprocity, which is a very good score, and a member of many, many teams, and doing it in multiple teams. And I haven't got the actual, this has all been normalised, but this is probably about 5 or 6 teams. Right? So this person is engaging across 5 or 6 teams. So, you know, now what we would do is we would just highlight where you are. Now you can choose. Now if this was me, I could say, well, I can improve either by reducing my activity in one team, just go to one team and that's really engaged strongly here. Or I might say, you know, I want to be one of these people up here. I'm actually going to try and engage more, but at the same time, join more teams and be active in more teams. These are the special people, right? These are the people that really are. This is the top right-hand corner, the link is. You know. So again, the way we use it isn't so much, let's put it in front of management. Yeah, that's fine. So this is my last slide. And culture mapping is one of my research hobbies. Who's heard of John Cotter? Right, he's the guy that wrote the book on culture in the 1990s. Right? So in 2014, he came up with this concept of the dual operating system. So what he really came to the appreciation was that there isn't just, companies just can't have one culture to cover everything. They have to do day-to-day stuff, which is short-term stuff, which is largely the hierarchy. But the stuff that, you know, people really want to do, the agile, innovative, sort of reactive sort of stuff, that happens in the network. So he's saying, well, you really need to have both of those. Now, when I was doing my culture mapping with the Yammer stuff, what I'd done was I'd taken a framework called the Competitive Values Framework, and I'd mapped our measures to their dimensions so that I could build a map. And what I wanted to do was compare it with actually running the survey. So I actually ran the survey with a few of our partners, admittedly not across their whole company, just individual members, but about 15 companies. And the process is you ask them, what is your existing culture, do you think? And what is your desired culture? Right, so, and of course the way that process worked is you look for the gap and say, well, you know, what can we do to get you to the desired culture, rah, 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 and that sort of stuff. What we found was that the Yammer culture tended to map to the desired one. And these dimensions were things like clan, which is really like a community, ad hoc, which is the informality, market, which is very much focused on the business short term, and hierarchy, we all know what that is, right? Turns out that the Teams map, and we had about 4 or 5 organisations using both of these, actually reflected more of the operational sort of culture. And Yammer was actually reflecting more of the network culture. Right? So, in fact, what we have here is a digital twin of what Cotter was sort of proposing in 2014 without any measures, right? This is a conceptual, theoretical sort of view. So this is quite exciting for us because we think at whatever point your organisation's at, you can decide whether you really are getting that balance right. So I think that's about it. So I think on my time, hopefully you don't have to look like this in the future. But I don't know if we've got any, we've probably got a few minutes of questions. So if there's any questions, have we got any time or any questions?
When you're looking at the interactions between people that you build your things, are they weighted based on recency or anything else, or are they just sort of static data
well,
points?
you can actually choose the time frame that you want to look at them at. So if you want to look at them over the last week, you set the time a week. If you want to look at 3 months or what have you. So basically they're not weighted. They're just, you know, you can choose to look at whatever window you want to look at.
What type of decisions and who are the decision makers outside the individuals who are looking at this data?
Well, as I said, it's there for everybody. It's democratised. So, you know, the individual could be the individual themselves. So you can make decisions about what you do because you're looking at your interaction patterns. You know, but clearly, if you're looking at the business segment, there'll be a business segment owner that's going to have an interest in that. If you're looking at the team level, if it's a single leader team, like in your case, you know, that manager will probably be interested in what's happening in that. So one of our team personas, I didn't talk about that. There's self-directed team. We also have a single leader team. We have a community, we have a forum, and we have a disconnected group. And those categories were actually, you know, whilst we labelled them, we actually drew them out of the data. So we ran a cluster analysis, a bit like, you know, what AI does in trying to characterise whether, you know, with face recognition or something like that. It's the same sort of technique. So what we found was that there was 5 distinct clusters in the interactions with teams. And that's why it told us that a team isn't a team isn't a team, right? There's actually 5 different sorts of use cases for teams that people are using it for. So the decision makers could be anybody. In fact, in the forum, usually we find that there will be a leader that's running that forum, so I'll be interested in the results of that. You know, a community usually has a core group, often not a single leader. You know, so in some ways, a self-directed team with a big gallery is a community, right? And the gallery are people that really aren't, they're members, but they're not really interacting much at all. You know, they're watching what's happening. Any other questions? Okay.
Can I just say, I love the fact that you are respecting that the human being, the employee themselves, needs to get some value out of this as well, rather than just the organisation. I think that just will pay off so much, and I can't wait to see where you head more with this work. So.
Yeah, no, well, we're actually doing a lot with this side. I mean, just you know, like the people who buy our software aren't the individuals sitting on the phone, right? They tend to be the analysts and the what have you. So they tend to be looking at the enterprise and the what have you. This year, we're actually going to do even more on the personal side. We have nudges that come to you, right, to say, well, you can maybe improve this. We have that in Yammer already, and we're going to roll it out for Teams soon. So we're going to put apps on phones so that, you know, the general, we want to really get the general users using this rather than just the analysts. So yeah, it's certainly a focus for us this year.
Exciting times. Thanks, Laurence.
Thank you.
Cheers.